You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, and thanks for stopping by yet again to listen to me chatting with other hikers and reading a few stories. We've got all of that today as usual, but we've also got an email I received recently from a listener that touched me more than I can really say. I hope that you'll indulge me as I read it out after the main interview. You're listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. This week we have two guests for the price of one. Julie Obear and Barry King are a couple of intrepid women who have hiked over 14,000 miles in the United States. I was asked by a listener, Lisa Rana, to interview them, and I'm really glad that I was able to track them down. They are experienced hikers now, but they share a common sense wisdom learned from the past 15 years of long distance hiking. You're going to love them. Then, as I mentioned previously, I'm going to read out an email from Kate Frischholz, followed by the last of the Mighty Blue class of 2019 debriefs. This time, we've got Katy Amphlett. You'll have to wait and see, but if she completed the hike, then 50% of our group successfully completed their through hikes this year, and if she didn't, that number drops to 37.5%. Whichever way you look at it, we seem to have beaten the odds. Katy will be along soon. Finally, Paul Stutzman has reached the Great Smoky Mountains, and as you're going to hear, his experience wasn't entirely positive, but certainly memorable. So let's get going with Julie and Barry, or Boston and Cubby. For the second time today, I'm starting again because I screwed up. I didn't press the record button. Fortunately, we only got about 5 minutes into the conversation. So I'm going to introduce Julie Obear and Barry King, who are Boston and Cubby. Hi, guys. How are you?
Hi.
Great.
We're
Thanks.
doing great.
So you're still okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
Now, these two like hiking a lot. They've done 14,000 miles, apparently, hiking. They've done the Triple Crown, Kilimanjaro, John Muir Trail, the American Discovery Trail, and the Long Trail. But you told me when we spoke 5 minutes ago, you did another short trail to start with.
Yes, called
was
the
that?
North-South Trail. It goes across the state of Rhode Island.
Short little trail.
Was that a preparation for the AT?
No, it was actually a preparation for when we did the Long Trail. We drove out to Vermont from Nebraska, and so we hit a couple parks and trails on
Along
the way out
the way,
there.
kind of
Yeah.
get our trail legs back a little bit. We decided to hike across Rhode Island because if you're going to hike across the state and you want to get started, you might as well pick the smallest.
Yeah. Now, you because you've done all these miles, you must look back, I guess, on those early, the early trail, which was 2005 for your AT hike, wasn't it?
Correct.
Yes.
2005. You look back at that hike, and do you consider yourself different hikers now relative to what you were like back in 2005?
Absolutely.
Most definitely.
Yeah,
Most
so-
definitely.
So we're much more knowledgeable, and we understand like our limits versus what people tell us our limits should be.
I know when we started the AT, people said, 10 miles, 13 miles, maybe 15 miles. That's a big day, and you go in with those expectations. But after you've got a few, 100 miles or a few thousand miles under your feet, you start to learn that those expectations were placed on you by someone else, and you can do a whole heck of a lot more than you ever thought.
Well, that's interesting because when I was reading your trail journals, I don't know whether you follow this through all your hiking trail journals, but certainly I was looking at the AT one this morning. You put a Greenland proverb there, which says, when you have gone so far that you can't manage one more step, then you've gone just half the distance that you're capable of.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yep.
the fact that you wrote that then, as opposed, when you'd never really done a lot of long distance hiking, why did you write that then? And you obviously proved to yourself that is actually true, that statement, isn't it?
I think I definitely thought that even just doing the Appalachian Trail, people thought we were crazy and like, how can you ever walk that far? And so I think our expectation was, well, absolutely, we can definitely do that.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at it as in total, I could walk 2,000 miles, and then
I never thought that at all, ever. Even once I got there, I just looked at the sign with total disbelief that I actually walked 2,000 miles. So,
Well, I kind of come from a little bit different perspective. I read a lot of history. So, people were on foot for, thousands of years before we ever came up with the AT. So I realized people can walk great distances and they've been doing it forever.
wow. So that proverb was in your mind when you started, because I presume that I know that when I set out, certainly the first time, it was such a far away goal, Katahdin. I couldn't think about it until about the last 500 miles. You always had Katahdin in your sight, did you?
I think in our site we did, but you're definitely correct in saying that you can't think that far ahead.
Definitely.
We looked at each section we did as a hiking trip. We would look at the first, like, till our next supply. We wouldn't look any further than our next supply, and that holds true. It's kind of a funny thing on the Pacific Crest Trail. I think it was Rainy Pass.
Oh, yeah.
We had just started the Pacific Crest Trail.
And we had read nothing about the trail, only the minimum amount, because I don't want to know everything ahead of time just because it's online. So we don't know what's ahead. And people would always say,
oh, wait till you get to Rainy Pass. Oh, wait till you get to Rainy Pass. And we're like, what the heck is Rainy Pass?
We don't know what it is, where it is, and why it's so great. And everybody keeps talking about it, but they kept referencing it.
And because we only literally looked just to the next supply town, and we would be excited to get there, and then we would kind of regroup and reset our sights to the next town. And that's how we did it on all the trails.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'd never approached it that way. I don't think I didn't know anything. I'd read so much about it, but going this second time, so many people said to me, why would you go a second time? I mean, you've done it already. And I said, it's going to be such a different journey. And my attitude this time was, because I was looking forward to, say, the Triple Crown in Virginia, McAfee Knob and places like that. Then I was excited by the prospect. So that was a different aspect of the hike to me this time than last time. So if you ever did one of your hikes for a second time, I don't know whether you have done that yet, but if you did it for a second time, would your approach be different than it was first time?
Obviously we would know what would be up ahead, but I don't know.
Sure.
I try to live in the moment, to take in what is there instead of what might come. I know where I am right now. I can look out, see what I'm doing, enjoy the moment I'm in, the space I'm in, and try not to look too far ahead. So I don't think I'd be looking towards the terminus or McAfee Knob when I'm in some other section of the trail. I just want to enjoy where I'm at the time.
I don't know. I might be looking forward to the pizza in Silver Springs or in Steamboat.
You
talk to any through hiker and it all comes down to food.
Yeah, because it does. Quite right too. Yeah, and I know I already asked you this question in our aborted 5 minutes where I didn't actually press record. But tell us what your favourite trail is. I know you have a difference of opinion on it, and tell us why.
Oh, I really like the Continental Divide Trail. I think everything about it is, they say it's exactly the same, only completely different. It's more grand. It's got a bigger perspective, it's just, I don't know. There's something about it. It's a little more remote. It's a little more rugged. Yes, it has mountains and hills, but those seem to be bigger, or the valleys are steeper, or
it's
I don't
less
know.
social for Barry.
Yeah, it's less social. I'm kind of sometimes I say I could be a professional hermit, although I love socializing and being out there with friends. I really truly could be a professional hermit.
And I definitely like the Pacific Crest Trail. I wouldn't say, it's my favorite if I look back on it, but I liked all of them for their own particular reasons. But the PCT has the social aspect plus the scenery, whereas the CDT is not quite as social, but again, it has grandeur views and such, but the PCT offers both.
Well, I can't do altitude. I did try to do the John Muir Trail twice and failed after 3 days because of the altitude. How did you discover you could do altitude, or have you always been able to do that?
I grew up skiing in Utah and Colorado, so I knew I could handle the altitude, although I had one experience with altitude sickness skiing with my family, but we would just, from here, even in Lincoln, we would go out to Colorado and hike. We hiked a couple 14ers before we did the Continental Divide Trail and all that.
Yeah, it was never a question to me. I guess I never thought about it. For me, it never crossed my mind that I would be susceptible to altitude sickness. It just never crossed my mind. So
Although the older you get, it does become more of a problem.
Hey, don't pick on me.
I know.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you
No,
very
that was
much.
for Barry. That was for
Picking on
Barry.
me, I think.
All right. No, I appreciate that because I just, it hit me like a ton of bricks both times. And it's so sad because I really wanted to do the John Muir Trail. And that thing you said about the PCT, and I guess the same thing would apply to the John Muir Trail, the grandeur of the scenery was just all around you the whole time, wasn't it? In those 3 days I was on the hike, that was just so darn beautiful, and I really enjoyed it.
And did you get to experience people while you were out there too?
Yes, I was hiking with some friends who I hiked the AT with, and that was really lovely, and obviously other people on the trail as well.
Right.
And there's just something about being out there. So do you like the solitude? And it sounds like you do, Barry. Am I getting the names right again? I keep getting these. You like the solitude. What about you, Julie? Do you like the solitude?
I definitely do, but I am more of a social. I like the social aspect of it. But when I'm alone, and we call it a double solo, because
we definitely refer to our hiking style as a double solo. We're out there alone, but we're out there just the two of us together, and it really works for us.
And we would avoid on the AT, we would definitely avoid the shelters after the first 400 miles when Sandman left us. He got injured and had to get off the trail after 400 miles. And we were spending a lot of time in the shelters initially. But after he left, Barry and I found it more, more pleasing to just be alone. And
on our own time.
Yeah, we would see people all day long and talk with them and have a great time, sit down and have lunch, maybe even have supper with them. But then we would take off and camp in the woods.
Yeah, I started developing that towards the end of my hike this time. I was with a guy called Trigger, and because I did spend time we did spend time around by lakes or just hanging out, just in the woods away from a shelter. And they were great times because I do like that quietness as well, just sitting there and listening to the forest, don't you?
Oh, absolutely.
I do too. We were fortunate when we hiked Continental Divide Trail. We met another thru hiker by the name of Redbeard, and he was the perfect hiking partner because he wasn't really a partner. We were both independent. We were independent. He was too, but we'd kind of catch up with each other sometime in the morning.
Well, he'd catch up with us.
He's really fast. But he would start out in the morning, and after we'd start 2 hours ahead of him. He'd catch us by lunchtime. We'd say hi. He'd go ahead. We'd maybe catch up around dinner time. Maybe we even camped in the same spot, but we were all completely independent. And whether we decided to do something one day or something, or he decided something else, it was nice. We were independent, but we were sort of connected.
We'd see each other week on, week off, or might hike together it was just random.
Yeah. And it's so nice because that friendship has continued to this day. Like I said, I just talked to him a couple of days ago.
Oh, nice. Oh, nice. Now, I know you talk about, and I think it was in an interview I saw, or maybe one of your trail journals, the importance of a through hike to you. You feel that once you decide on a through hike, you don't, if you'd stopped, you wouldn't come back to where you were and carry on. You want to do a through hike from beginning to end. Why is that? Why was that important?
For me, it's the mentality of it. I like challenge. I like hard. I think, I say that I like adventure because there's always an aspect of difficulty in it. And I think that comes from a through hike. I think you have to have the grit, the tenacity to know that once you start your first step on the trail, that it's a long haul all the way to the end. And the idea of being able to stop anytime you want it's fine, but it's just a different mentality. And so I want to complete something that's involves challenge, endurance, and just toughen it out. I guess that's what I look for in a hike. So that's why I like the long haul.
So are you now, and this is something I absolutely don't know. Do you hike just weekends and days, or do you only do through hikes now?
As life kind of gets in the way sometimes, we haven't done as many through hikes recently because of the time factor. So recently I've switched over to, I guess you could call it through hiking every day around my neighborhood. So I started out walking, and then I ended up running, and then I ended up completing my first ultra 2 weeks ago, a 100-mile race.
Oh, wow. Well done. Do you enjoy that?
Yeah, I definitely did. And I definitely enjoyed it. I think I did about 1,800 miles worth of training runs. So it's the same through hiker mentality. And in fact, what I've learned about in my research, just kind of getting into that, was through hikers make great ultra runners. They have that same desire,
The
that
tenacity,
drive to
yeah.
just go that distance and to be able to kind of hurt for a while, or at least mentally, just push through and get it done, whether it's raining or it's hard, and by the time you're done, you look back, that was a great adventure.
That may be what you found yourself. There's no possibility I could do an ultra run. I'm 67 years old this month. It was a struggle to get through a through hike for a second time. So I suspect ultra running is not in my future anytime. Now, because you've done all these things, the Triple Crown and JMT and stuff, and we have not had anybody on to talk about Kilimanjaro, the American Discovery Trail. So can you tell us what it was like to go up Kilimanjaro and how long did it take you to do it?
So yeah, we did Kilimanjaro. We kind of did it in conjunction with a safari, but the main reason for going over there was to hike Kilimanjaro.
Right.
It was a 9-day trek.
Wow.
7.5
I think
days
it's 7 up and 2 down.
Yeah, and I don't know why.
How far is it?
How high is it?
How high or how far?
No, I meant how far. If it's 9 days, I mean that's. Or do you just do a relatively short amount of mileage per day?
We did relatively short amount of mileage per day, especially toward the last 2 days. I think we went up. I really don't know the mileage. I'm sorry. I didn't. I should have refreshed.
First off, it's all, I think, in kilometers, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. But
Right.
I just don't know.
It's all about.
I can convert that.
Yeah, it's all about elevation gain. When you're starting out, you're walking just like you're walking around your block. But as you go up in elevation, you start to need to go slower. And by the time you get to the top, if you can put one foot even past the toe of the other foot on every step, you're doing good.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, it was very hard up at the top. It was one step at a time, and it was an agonizing step.
You normally take one step, take a breath, catch it, and catch your breath, take another step, catch your full breath. Because we're not from there, and the average person can, it's
you're not altitude trained.
16,000.
Yeah, I think it was elevation is. Yeah, I'm not sure the elevation either. I mean, I knew it back then, but I would say that it was very rewarding, and the reasons we went there, it was to hike the Kilimanjaro.
Sure.
Mount Kilimanjaro, but
you still have that through hiker mentality. You're like, I'm going to get to the terminus. I'm going to get to the summit. But
we found what was even more pleasurable was meeting the people. It was
we learned we tried to learn Swahili while we were there as fast as we could.
Oh, really?
As many words as we could, because all the expedition people that work it's like a Royal British Expedition the way they run it there. But a lot of people carrying the gear, they want to learn English, and so we wanted to communicate with them and learn as much about them and their culture and what their day-to-day life was. So we tried to learn as much as we could. And
I think that was almost as rewarding as reaching the summit of Kili.
Most definitely. When we look back, it's the people we met, it's the experience we had. It's not necessarily standing on the summit.
Although that was great too.
Yeah.
And that is what hiking is about, isn't it? Because you another quote of yours I saw, which is I'm going to ask you about, is you say that life is distilled down to the basic needs of water, food, shelter, and happiness. So what you've just said, you struggle to put one toe in front of the other going up. How does that make you happy? And what about the struggle of hiking makes you happy?
Because it's hard. I mean, I just think there's something to it. I think, I'm just like the average person. I'd rather sit in my recliner and read a book or watch some TV, but there's something about something being hard, where you have to put out an effort, and that, I don't know, that's what
it may not feel great at the time, but it definitely feels good when you've completed it.
Yeah. And even in the struggle, it's good.
Yeah.
But funny enough, I gave a presentation last night about my AT hike this year to a group, and that was one of the questions. Why do you enjoy it? and I do find it quite difficult to answer, to be honest with you.
I mean,
Yeah, it
Because you
is.
just one of you just said I'd rather sit in a recliner or whatever. Well, you clearly wouldn't rather sit in a recliner because you go and make it difficult for yourself because it's easy to sit in a recliner, isn't it?
well, I guess it gives you better perspective, because hard makes hard harder when it's easy is so easy.
I guess. And talking of difficult, so the American Discovery Trail, which apparently is 7,000 miles. Did you do that in one hit?
Yes, but it's a little misnomer there. There are two routes. It starts on the East Coast and it
Right.
splits in the Midwest, and then you can take a northern route or a southern route. We chose a northern, and then it comes back together in Denver. And so
Right.
overall, if you do one of them, it's about 4,800 miles. And so we hiked about 4,800 miles.
All right. So, I see. Okay, that makes even then that's a heck of a long way. How long did that take you to do that?
It was
Some days if you asked Boston, she'd say too long.
All right.
In total, it was about 8 months, maybe a little less.
It was 7 months of hiking with a few weeks in there with some difficulties with the water cache that we had put in. We'd put in
Right.
numerous ones the year before, and some of them had leaked, so that kind of set us back a little bit.
So how do you do that? The water cache? What do you do? You say you did it a year before.
Yeah, so we went out the year before and had kind of got the trail on our GPS so that we knew exactly where the trail was going to be going and where we would be. And we took a 4-wheel truck out there and a bunch of water
In
in
jugs.
jugs. And we had read a journal before where they had done it. And so we thought, well, it's better than doing it when we get out there, because who's going to want to take the time to go cache when you hike out there?
During a
You're going to
through-hike.
have to rent a car and do all the logistics. So we did it the year before, and the journal we had read had also done it the year before. So
Because there's several 100-mile stretches through desert with no water.
yeah, so you have Western Colorado,
Wow.
all of Utah, and most of Nevada that you have to cache water. So
Wow.
we buried the water. We had 2 shovels and buried water. GPS marked them, put little like rusty cans on it. I mean, you can always find cans in the wilderness.
It's amazing how you think you're in the most remote place in this country, and you can always find a tin can.
You can always find trash.
Oh
Yeah,
dear.
So we went out and buried it, and we just hiked toward it. And when we got there, the first cache, I think, was in Western Colorado National Monument Park or whatever. What is that?
Yeah.
And it was full, and so we're like, oh sweet, this is good. We didn't have any concerns. And then
Wow.
we hiked to another cache, and we were probably 2 days away from any natural water, and it was empty. And so
We got to be really dangerous.
Yeah,
It was
we
the
started to
hottest year
get-
on record at that
yeah,
point.
we started to get really concerned. We ended up jumping off in Moab and kind of regrouping, getting our head back in the game, because we were both so, I mean, it's a life or death situation. It's not anything
Sure.
to shake a stick at. It
You
was,
know, if that water source that you buried, that jug of water leaks and there's nothing left, it's 30 miles to your next, it's 30-mile stretch between your water sources. And that's a lot when
Wow.
it's over 100
That
degrees
is.
and not a stick of
Yeah.
shade.
so we had to regroup a couple different times in there and cache more water. So we would, and it definitely made the hiking a lot less stressful. After the first water cache was empty, we were like, well, what's that all about? And then the second one,
Yeah.
now we're starting to get a little more panic stricken, and
Yeah.
you can't really hike
Yeah.
comfortably thinking, oh my God, are we getting ourselves into a situation we're not going to get out of?
Yeah. Just to end that story, we did find out that the jugs leaked because it was a production error
Right.
in producing the jugs. So yeah, they were bad jugs.
Have you ever worried for your lives on this? I mean, because the reason I asked is because I know you. One of the things you talk about in your trail journals is how you prepare well for these things. Do you feel always you're in control of the situation, or do you sometimes feel very exposed out there?
For the most part, I wouldn't use the word controlled, but I personally like logistics. So I'm the one who does all the planning ahead of time. So I just really like logistics. But once we're out there, I feel like we have some sort of plan set in place. But we definitely have an awareness of the dangers that are out there. I try not to be overwhelmed by it. I really am an optimist.
I think the only time you ever are exposed, especially as two female hikers, is when you're having to hitchhike to a town where you're not in control of the hitchhiking situation, where you're just sticking your
Right.
thumb out on the side of the road. We tend to
Yeah.
hitchhike by asking people for a ride. Like you go to a gas station or you go to the hotel
Sure.
breakfast and you find someone willing to bring you back. But there are situations where you're on the side of a road and you're having to stick your hand out. So I think for me, that's the only time I ever felt like, well, what are we getting ourselves into? But, when you are on the AT, it's so many trail towns and people are aware of
Sure.
the situation. So
Yeah, and that happens a lot on these trails. The trail crossings, even the remote trails, have fewer road crossings. So obviously that's going to be a more concentrated location for any hiker that comes by. So the people that do come through there, they generally know. But you do have to keep your smarts about it. We kind of have rules between the two of us. If one of us doesn't feel right about the ride, the other person is not to try to convince the other one, hey, it is okay. It's like, no, once one
Right.
person says, no, I think we're just going to hike on, or whatever the word is, you're to drop it and just agree with them and not take the ride. But we've never run into
Wow.
anything like that.
That's sensible of you. Pre-agreeing your arrangements with one another. That's kind of pretty rare, I would think. So, have either of you had problems in terms of one wants to do one thing and one wants to do the other thing, other than in the hitchhiking situation?
You mean just in hiking in general?
Yeah, and to say, well, it's one wants to go a bit further this day. Do you just generally work as a team, or does one push things forward?
Yes, this is how I'll tell you how the day starts. I don't want to start it. I really my saying is morning lasts till 11:59. So I don't ever want to get up. In Boston here, she pops up like toast in a toaster, which is really irritating some days. And all of a sudden we're out, we're on the trail and we're going. Okay. So then it gets to the end of the day.
And I want to set up camp because I'm the one that has to set the tent up. I'm the one that cooks dinner. Well, Barry's been cooking dinner. Yeah.
So I'm like, well, let's just go one more mile. We can do another. Pretty soon it's an hour after dark, and we've got 3 or 4 more miles in, and so she gets us started and I get us finished. So between the two of us, we get a long day in.
Well, that's a pretty good team effort. I had a very similar experience this year myself. So, and my partner kept me accountable the whole time, which was a good thing. He just wanted to get home, frankly. He just wanted to get there as soon as possible. So we actually finished more than a week ahead of where I planned to finish because he just kept pushing me on, which was great for me. I want to take you back to 2005 because this is a show about the AT. We're not going to talk too much about it. As you said, it's not your favorite.
No. You're the one that's
okay.
Because they're all different.
The AT definitely has its pluses.
I mean, none of this would have happened without the AT.
Exactly. I quite agree. But and what I was struck was straight away, and back in 2005, there wasn't the emphasis, perhaps it was probably just starting then, but the emphasis on lightweight gear. You both weighed in at about 35 pounds, I believe, when you first started.
Yeah.
How was I guess your gear choices have changed quite dramatically. So what do you get down to now? And do you have the same sort of gear for each long through hike, or does it change relative to the environment?
Yeah, I think we have a pretty solid core group of gear.
And it doesn't change depending on the trail. We pretty much have it set where it's versatile and light enough that we don't have to worry about it. But on the AT, we found that
we had some of the lightest packs out there when we left. I think mine might have been 29 with a liter of water in it and a few days of food. But
now I probably weigh in without food and water. I weigh in close to 15 pounds.
You're at 15 base weight. I'm at 12. Right. And that's comfortable. That's comfortable.
Yeah.
Of course it is.
But technology has come so far, so.
Oh, totally. It totally has. One of the things I'd learned this year, which I'd never learned the first time, because my wife kept sending me packages because I was losing so much weight. She'd send me more than I needed. And I learned this year to try to get into town with no food.
Absolutely.
So that I was just getting. And that's one really good tip, I think, for people who do listen, that don't, people say they pack their fears. Don't overpack your bag with food, because make sure you've got enough for how long you're going to be out there, but then get into town and then restock, because it's lovely going in with an empty food bag, isn't it?
Yeah, well, especially on the AT, you are never less than a day or more than a day away from civilization. So
Exactly.
even if you do run out of food, you can get it somewhere.
And there's always another hiker who's overpacked, who's willing. They're practically begging you to take some food off of them.
Yeah. Well, somebody I interviewed once told me that I actually was giving away food in those early days. So, just kind of embarrassing, really, to admit.
We had another hiker by the name of Sticky Fingers, and she would say, it's not time's a ticking, it's food's a ticking. So when you go out there, you have so much food, and that determines how far or how fast you're going to go.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. Yeah. So you've done all these miles, and firstly, what else is there for you to do in terms of these hikes? Because you've done the major long distance ones over here, or would you ever revisit some of them?
Well, I think about revisiting, but there's so much of this country that I want to hike and so much of the world that I'd like to see. But
I've always been interested in the Camino, and Barry wants to
would like to do some of
New
the Camino.
Zealand.
New Zealand would be awesome. But people ask us what's next. They ask us that a lot, thinking it's going to be bigger and better. Just because you hike a hill, now you got to hike a mountain, now you got to hike Everest. It doesn't. I tell them all the time, it doesn't have to be bigger or further or harder to be better. Just a new experience is better. It's not about the biggest, the tallest, the hardest. It's sometimes those little hikes. Going across Rhode Island was a phenomenal little hike. I loved it.
And that's actually behind the question I asked about your favorite trail, because it often does boil down to your own personal experience on that trail, doesn't it?
Yes.
You might have it might have been a better hike, but it wasn't as good for you because this happened and that happened and that happened. So this is the thing about, to me, and what you said earlier on is very important, to stay in that moment and not wish those miles away, really.
Yeah, I remember when we were hiking the Appalachian Trail, Barry, her feet were miserable
in
the beginning and even through the end. I mean, she never really had a great pair of shoes that weren't giving her problems. So, and it was a super wet hike. I mean, when is the AT ever not wet? So she would say all the time, I am never doing this again. I mean, we knew we were finishing from the day we put our foot on the trail. We knew we were going to finish, but she kept saying, I will never do this again. This is my last long hike. I'm never, ever. Like every day she said it. 14,000 miles later, she lied.
Yeah. It was doing this presentation I did last night. I took them back to when I did the presentation last time, and one of my slides said, I will never, ever hike again as long as I live, because I just didn't think I would. And yet you miss it because you look back on the effect it had on your body, the effect it had on your mind, the way in which it calmed you down in many ways. And that for me was what drew me back there. And I'm sure it's what drew you both back there as well, wasn't it?
It's about the simplicity of it. Everything is so simple. You don't have all these outside worries and concerns when you're out there for 5 months. You're just one foot in front of another. You've got this core group maybe around you that maybe you're hiking with, or kind of just around you. You've got your next meal. You already know what, it's just simple.
Yeah. Also too, when we started, before we ever did a long through hike, I kept saying to Barry, I'm like, I don't know why these people say it will change you. Like, I'm not going to change. I am who I am.
People are nuts. That's just a walk in the woods. What are we talking about?
Yeah, but it does. It does. It changes your mental, like what you need from life. It changes what you need from people too. So it definitely.
Yeah, you get,
and
home.
You want more of it. You want more.
Yeah, you want more. And when you are home, you want to get rid of everything you own.
I wasn't actually going to ask that because it's that question, but I'm going to ask it now you've mentioned it. So when you did this hike, and you say people said it would change you, you didn't think it would change you. Do you notice the changes once you're back from the hike, when you start reintegrating into society, or did you notice those changes when you're on the trail itself?
I think you notice it more when you're off the trail, because people on the trail are more like-minded, and they've evolved into a hiker mentality, and the bare necessities are what you need. So, but when you reintegrate, people,
they just don't understand. You find out you are different from them. And I mean, look at the simple fact that not one of them, you probably don't know anybody who has ever been away from home for 5 months in their lifetime. In one stretch for 5 months. it's rare, really. And so that
And
perspective isn't there, for them.
so do you get what I got this year? I wasn't expecting it, but when I got to spring of this year, so obviously for the second time, and I started walking down that scrubby little path, you come to the car park and you go through onto the trail. I suddenly felt, oh my God, I feel right at home here. And I didn't do that first time because I wasn't home. So every time you start again, whatever the hike, do you find yourself thinking, this is where I belong?
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
And so
Definitely.
you want it more, so you want it again. Yeah, definitely.
And then you find,
Right.
you're so comfortable on the trail that when you're getting towards the end, you feel like you're slowing down. You're like, I could have finished that, we could bust this out. And you're like, nah.
Yeah, you don't want it
let's
to
not.
end because you have to go back to everything.
Yeah. Well, now you are back in everything.
Yeah.
And you said when was your last through hike?
It was the long trail.
The long trail, that 2017.
We should have refreshed.
So you're a couple of years out from that. Do
Yeah.
you have any immediate or plans to do something soon? Because you mentioned the Camino. I love the Camino. I did that last October.
Yeah.
And it's a 32 days it was, and I really, really enjoyed that. So do you have anything in mind you've actually got plans for going forward?
We definitely had some plans, and then as Barry had said earlier, life kind of gets in the way. We ended up selling our $40,000 house for a little bit bigger upgrade, and so financially, you have to be, it's a financial undertaking to go on a through hike because you leave life for so long, and
It is.
I think so. We just have to put it off for a few years before we can get back up to that.
Yeah, we were kind of in the habit of doing maybe one every other year. I retired in 2005. And so that's when I started this whole hiking adventure. I was in my early 40s at that time. But we still kind of, every other year we would work, and then every other year we would hike. And then life gets a little bit ahead of you sometimes, and where you don't have a handle quite on it. It sort of takes care of you instead of you taking care of it. So things get put on the back burner. So we're itching to go.
Yeah, we still have the itch for sure. We just got to figure it out.
I bet you are. Well, it's been a delight talking to you. I'm so pleased that a couple of people reached out to me because they wanted to hear from you. So thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much for having us and hunting me down.
Yeah, I do apologize for the cyber stalking.
Oh, no.
I kind of have to do that from time to time. But yeah, thanks very much for talking to us, and hopefully we'll catch up again sometime.
All right, great. Thanks.
All right, great talking
Cheers
with
then.
you.
Yeah. And you. Bye.
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 Honest team, those two are, eh? I thought that they shared some really good pointers that many of you might consider when you head out next time. It was good to meet the two of them. Thanks, Lisa, for pointing me in their direction. Now, this email. I get loads of emails from listeners, and I read every single one. And I reply to as many as I can, even though it's often a few weeks later. If you've written to me in the past and I didn't respond, please write back, because that would have just been an oversight on my behalf. However, this struck me like a ton of bricks, and I thought you might like to hear it. It's from Kate Frischholz. Kate says, "Hello, Mighty Blue, Steve. I'm writing to let you know how special your podcast is to me, and if you're interested, to share my journey with you. Hiking for me goes back 30 years to when I hiked my first mountain at 3 years old in the Adirondacks in upstate New York. My parents said I always loved to climb, and I scrambled up the mountain so fast. I have no memory of that, but lucky me, they took my sisters and me hiking in the mountains just about every summer after that, with a few exceptions. Now I live farther away from mountains, and I miss it more and more. I've been lucky to go about every other year lately, and I have to make do with finding other places to hike in western Pennsylvania. My mother is definitely the outdoorsy one of the family, and I give her a lot of credit for getting us all out there when we were so little. She was the one who first told me about the AT, and I thought it was pretty cool, but at that time I never imagined myself doing it. Now I can't get the idea out of my head. I wished I had thought of this sooner, now that I have debt and children. Besides hiking being in my blood, I'll tell you why the AT and everyone's journey on it have started to become such a big deal for me. In March 2017, my first son was born, abruptly past his due date in an emergency C-section. From that moment, we had one problem after another, with feeding, sickness, weight gain, sleep, and on and on. We knew he was not meeting developmental goals and started losing weight. There is nothing scarier than not knowing what is wrong with your child and feeling helpless. Just before his first birthday, we landed in the hospital for 3 weeks for one problem and uncovered one after another with test after test, and finally landed on a diagnosis of Williams syndrome, a rare and random genetic condition. Our lives, which were already in something of a mess, were turned upside down. This was not what we expected. I started listening to your podcast about a month before we went into the hospital. It was a wonderful escape from all the frustrations of being a new parent with a child of still unknown special needs. It reminded me of my childhood, my love of the outdoors, a big part of who I am at a time when I felt utterly lost. In the hospital and in the months after, I downloaded every single episode and cherished binge listening whenever I could. It was not only an escape, but the lessons everyone talks about extend perfectly into a life of challenges and our journey as a special needs family. I can relate to so much of what I hear from experience on and off the trail. I absolutely love living vicariously through others, since I'm not sure how my son's future looks. We are lucky that his condition is more mild than what it could be, but there may be some physical challenges as he grows older. One of the coolest things about WS is that people with this condition are extremely friendly, outgoing, loving people, often the life of the party. If all goes well, he could be the life of the trail someday. Who knows? All this is to say, I don't know how or when I will hit the AT, or if life will provide the opportunity to through hike like I want. Your guests feel like my trail family through life and keep my passion for hiking burning. I know I will get out there even for sections at some point, providing we humans don't overheat the planet before I'm able. She writes in parentheses, by the way, would you be interested in interviewing someone about the effects of climate change on the AT or other wild spaces? I'd be so interested, or depressed, to hear about that. Close those brackets. Thank you so much for bringing together people's amazing stories. It has been amazing to feel connected during such a challenging time of life. Sincerely, Kate Frischholz. I was so touched to get that, and reading it again here, I'm touched all over again. Who'd have thought that people ambling around in the woods and sharing their stories could have such a beneficial effect on somebody going through such a difficult time in their lives? My guests and all of you out there feel like a trail family. That is powerful. All I can say is that we all wish Kate and her son the very best future that they can build, and we hope that you continue to listen to our stories in the months and years ahead. And wouldn't it be something if Kate's son were to become the life and soul of the trail? Now we catch up with Katy Amphlett as she lets us know what happened to her this summer in a through-hike attempt. Here's Katy. Right, we're on with the last member, last but not least, of our class of 2019, Katy Amphlett. Hi, Katy. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Steve?
Not bad. I think you might have been one of the first ones that I actually spoke to as well. And so far, of the 8 of us who started, three of us so far have finished. So tell everybody, did you finish or not?
I did finish.
I knew that, don't you?
Yeah. I know that you do.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And how long did it take you?
It took me 181 days, so just shy of half a year.
Right, almost exactly the same as me. And in fact, when I was listening again to our conversation we had before, and I was expecting you to pass me. So what happened?
I like to hike slow, and I like to take zeros. So I let myself take them.
All right. Did you take a lot? Because you said you'd actually saved quite a bit of money for this. So the money lasted, obviously. Did it work out to be more expensive or less expensive than you thought?
I guess a little more expensive than I thought. But I did take a lot of zeros, and I took zeros sometimes that weren't necessarily close to the trail. I actually went to New York City 2 times. So
really?
Really. I used a little more than I thought I would. But
oh my gosh.
That was good because I'd saved extra so that I could do those things. And I wanted to be able to say yes to all the opportunities that came up on trail.
Oh, right.
And it turned out to be a lot of fun. So I had just as much fun on the trail as I did off the trail. So it was great.
So was that an aspect of the trail you hadn't anticipated, where you'd be taking time off and taking all these zeros? Or were zeros one of these things that were kind of, you heard what it meant, you know what it meant, but you didn't really know what it was going to be like?
I guess at the start, I sort of thought that zero was like a dirty word, that like, oh, I shouldn't take it unless I really need to, or if I'm injured. And then I just ended up starting with a really cool group of people. And so I took my first zero in Helen, actually. So very early on the trail. Right. And then I took my first double zero in Franklin. So from the get-go, I got into taking zeros. But it was fun to enjoy the towns along the trail. I didn't expect that aspect of the trail. and to meet different people, and not just trail people, but town people too. So.
Yeah, you actually you spent a lot of time. You just said with we got up in with the Tramley pretty early on. Did you spend a lot of time with those guys?
I did, and kind of on and off with different people throughout. But I ended up hiking about the last half of the trail with the same 4 people. And they started. 3 of them started within a day of me, and one of them started the same day as me. And we actually met the first day on the trail, and we hiked the vast majority together.
Isn't that amazing how that happens? It really is. Yeah.
Now,
the audience can't see you, but I can see you. And actually, I've seen pictures anyway. You're quite a slight woman.
Mm-hmm.
Did you lose weight? And if you did, how did you cope with that? Because I don't look like you could afford to lose a lot of weight.
I lost a little bit of weight. I definitely couldn't have afforded to lose much more. I'd say more than losing a lot of weight, though. I did gain a lot of muscle. My calves are like the same size as my thighs now, which is crazy. They just got huge. They wouldn't stop.
That's not a bad look on a guy. It's not so good on a woman, though, is it?
It's a little questionable. And yeah, I didn't shave my legs the whole time. So I have gigantic, very hairy calves.
Oh, dear. How funny. Now, I know you quit your job as a kindergarten teacher.
That's right.
And you actually did it before the school year started, which was very considerate of you.
Mm-hmm.
And you previously said that you'd be going back to it. Will you be going back, or has the trail pushed your thoughts in another direction?
It's still up in the air right now. I've actually only been at home for 2 days, so I'm still figuring out my next steps. But I'm thinking I'll go back into something with children in education for sure. It's just hard because I finished a little later than I thought I would. And so now that it's already October, the school year is pretty much underway. So it'll be harder for me to find a job in a school.
Oh, right. But that is where you want to go, though. You want to end up as a kindergarten teacher still.
Eventually. So I can spend the rest of this year being a substitute or doing something else, and then start back up next school year, I think.
Yeah. You just said that it took you longer than you thought. Did you? Because you said you were quite slow and deliberately quite slow.
Mm-hmm.
Did you worry about that timing, or was that something you just let happen and it happened when it happened?
I guess there were points where I got a little nervous, and people love to point out to me that I was at the tail end of the bubble, which always made me nervous.
Oh,
but
God.
Every time I did the calculations, it seemed like I was just on track for a 6-month hike, even though I wasn't doing it on purpose. Every time I do it, it was saying, okay, up 6 months, it's going to be. And I guess I was thinking I'd be a little bit faster than that just because I'm on the younger side. But I like to hike slow. I like to enjoy it and take breaks.
Yeah.
Along the way.
This thing, I've seen a number of finishers recently on their Katahdin pictures. They all say, the last one to Katahdin wins, and I still feel that's true. You should enjoy it. You should take as much time as you want to enjoy it. It's your hike, you do it at the speed you want to do it at.
Yeah. Early on, someone gave me the advice too that nobody wishes that they did it faster. So
yes,
why rush through it when you're going to wish you were on trail when you're done?
That's absolutely true. Now it's always an emotional moment when you get to the sign on Katahdin.
Mm-hmm.
What was your main emotion? Was it relief, sadness, excitement? You're glad it was over? How did you feel?
A combination of so many different things. Definitely a little bit of relief that I made it to the top. It was very snowy and icy that day, so my adrenaline was going. But sadness that the trail was done. I also got to share that moment with my tramley, which was great. We all gave each other a big group hug, and
I saw that picture on Facebook. Yeah,
that
was great.
Yeah. It was great, and there were so many through hikers up there that day, so there was a ton of excitement. We had a sunny day that was bookended by rainy days on either side, so basically every through hiker in the area was up there. Nice. The same day. So it was a lot of excitement, a lot of emotion.
And was the trail tougher than you'd anticipated, or was it kind of how you'd expected it to be? Because you did a lot of preparation for this, didn't you?
I did. I don't think it was tougher than I thought it would be. I'd say I was prepared for the terrain. I thought I was prepared for the mental aspects of it, but things that ended up being challenging for me mentally, I guess, were a little different than what I thought. I thought I would deal with more loneliness. I thought I would deal with spending more time by myself. But as I said, I ended up grouping up with people pretty quickly.
Interesting.
And so things like the weather, that definitely weared on me more mentally than I thought it would. Rain, cold, that kind of stuff.
As you know, I went this year as well. And I thought generally we had pretty good weather throughout the year.
We really did. I got so lucky. I think the longest stretch of rain I had was like 4 or 5 days. And that was just one instance. Other than that, it was like less than 24 hours every single time.
All right. Well, when Trigger and I were hiking, we as soon as we saw rain in the forecast, we just got off the trail or got to a shelter. I hardly ever packed my my tent up wet, which was just amazing for me. It really was. And I'm glad I did it that way, I've got to tell you. So what was it like going out on your own for the first time? I know you tried out 6 days last summer on the AT to see what it was like. Were there times, and I know you say you got together with a family, were there times when you camped completely alone?
There were times that I camped completely alone. And I wasn't as afraid as I was when I tried that, when I did the 6 days. And I guess because I didn't ever camp totally alone at the very beginning of the trail, it was virtually impossible to do that.
Yeah.
Just because there's so many people around. I just felt so comfortable in my tent by the time that I did it. That was my little home. And so it was like, I didn't feel scared or nervous about camping all by myself.
Isn't that strangely irrational? You zip up your bug net, so you know nothing can get inside, and yet you've got this thin layer of whatever it is on your tent that stops the outside getting in, and yet you feel just totally fine, don't you?
Oh, yeah. It feels like, I'm like, oh, it's my tiny home. I'm in my house right now. But yeah, it's just one piece of fabric over the top of me. That's all that's
a couple of times I slept with both my vestibules open, so I was not cowboy camping, but I was covered. I had the bug net, and I had the top obviously covering in case it did get wet. But I was open on both sides by myself. I just loved it. I just thought that feeling was just fantastic. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's kind of refreshing to be all
yes, it is,
and just
It definitely is, yeah. Now, you also mentioned that you previously had some knee pain, and you said you weren't going to go with a knee brace. Did that rear its head? Well, rear its knee, actually, because one of your big worries about doing this was getting injured. Was it a concern about your knee?
I did have knee pain, not the entire time, a lot at the beginning. Some of the folks I grouped up with right at the beginning were definitely a little faster than me, and I fell into the trap that I said I wouldn't fall into of going too fast too soon.
Of course.
And so I did like 15, 16 miles coming into Franklin. And as soon as I got there, I knew I had to slow down. I wasn't ready for that because both my knees were really hurting at that point. And I did end up getting a knee brace in Hot Springs.
All right.
And I didn't really need it for the middle of the trail. But then once I got to the White Mountains, those descents, I can't imagine that those would tear up anybody's knees. They were so steep and so many big steps down. But luckily, it was never debilitating. And it was never like, I couldn't walk anymore. It was bothersome at times, but not awful.
Yeah, some of those long downhills. I always thought that the north side of those mountains in the Whites are so much tougher. When you go down, and in Maine as well, when you go down those, oh my gosh, thinking it back makes my knees hurt. And especially at my age, I mean, my knees are probably should be pretty bad by now anyway, but I got through it without any serious knee pain at all. So
good for you.
And when you mentioned knee pain yourself, I kind of wondered whether it was going to impact you, but generally, how do they feel now you're finished?
I feel better than I expected. I know a lot of people said they had more pain kind of once they stopped hiking than they ever felt on the trail. I was definitely stiff the first 3 mornings I woke up after the trail, but I feel really good. And no knee pain, no foot pain. So
you sound bright. You don't sound like you've had any. You've got down at all about anything. You feeling pretty good?
I'm feeling good. I took 4 days with my trail family after we finished, and we got an Airbnb and just hung out together in Maine.
How nice!
I think that was a great little transition time. And then my boyfriend drove out to pick me up from Maine, and we drove back through Canada. So then I had a second vacation after my 6-month vacation.
Nice.
So I've only been at home for 2 days, so I've had no time to get sad about not being on the trail.
So what date did you actually finish? October when?
October 5th.
Okay, so it was quite late. Yeah, quite late in the year then, yeah. So, and the last thing is, did you, actually 2 more things actually. You were slightly concerned, you said, about, I think you referred to them as the sucky parts of the trail in the middle section. Like you mentioned Virginia. I mean, I love Virginia. Did you enjoy it?
I loved Virginia. Virginia was great. And there's no sucky parts of the trail.
There really aren't.
No, you have bad days, not even full bad days. I feel like I had bad hours, but the trail in general was just so good. And I loved all of it. Even the parts that maybe were more challenging technically or more boring technically, they weren't ever really boring.
No, they were never boring. Pennsylvania was never boring, but it was tough, wasn't it? I mean, the rocks they rip at your soul, don't they? The rocks.
They do.
The sole of your shoes and the sole of your heart.
Your actual soul, yeah.
Sure. But, that's still part of the trail, and I love that part of it. And so the last question, you were talking about you want to be connected, you want to get connected to the AT community, which you clearly did by traveling with a tramley. But you also said you wanted to feel that you connected with yourself. Do you feel you achieved any of that, or have you not had the distance of time to look back and see how it's affected you?
I think kind of the last couple days of hiking, I was thinking back to, my time on the trail and how I felt different than I did at the beginning. And I was I do feel like I gained a lot of confidence just in what I want and what makes me happy. And on the trail, I was very willing to say, even though I was traveling with the trail family, where I wanted to stop, what I wanted to do, how many miles I wanted to hike. And I think that's a little different for me. In the past, I've been very much a people pleaser. And so being able to vouch for myself and speak up for what I want, I think that's a great change that came from the trail. And I'm sure as I take more time away from the trail, I'll notice other things that have changed. But yeah, the confidence and vouching for myself is definitely something.
It sounds like bad news for your boyfriend then.
Yeah, he should get ready for a storm of opinions.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you're able to complete it. So 4 of our 8 completed it, so we beat the odds. So I'm very pleased about that.
We did. And congrats to you too on finishing for a second time.
Thank you. I always knew I was going to finish.
That's good.
I can only say that now, of course. But thanks so much for doing this. I'm glad we did this, and I'm so sad we couldn't catch up more on the trail, but I lost so many contact details. I just can't tell you. I just screwed it all up. But, no, there was enough to think about when we were on the trail. So I'm glad we got the chance to connect now, and I'm really pleased you finished it.
Me too. Thank you.
Take it easy then.
Yep, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye. She did it. So half the Mighty Blue class of 2019 made it all the way to the end. I could not be more pleased, and I was so delighted when she let me know that she'd finished. Finally this week, Paul Stutzman hits the Smokies, an area of the trail that I think it's fair to say has a mixed reputation with hikers. I kind of loved and loathed it at the same time. Let's just say that most hikers have a complicated relationship with the Smokies. I'll see you next week. Chapter 8, The Smoky Mountains. Several storms rolled over us during the night, but by 6 o'clock the next morning the rain had stopped and we were on the trail, headed for Fontana Dam. I'd called ahead to the Hike Inn, a hostel near the dam, to check on available space. They were full. Many hikers were out on the trail for the weekend. Plan B was to stay at Fontana Lodge in the Fontana Village Resort. Just when we had become stinking, honest-to-goodness woodsmen, a resort was tossed our way to soften us up again. The village, a few miles off the trail, also offered a small grocery, an outfitter and a post office. Fontana Dam was built during World War II when the war effort demanded more electricity. The cottages in the village housed up to 5,000 workers during the construction of the dam. Now those cottages are vacation rentals and timeshares. The rain brought fresh signs of new growth. Everywhere vegetation was changing. One small sentinel of spring met me, a morel mushroom, standing alone in the middle of my path. Climbing hills and scouring woods in search of those tasty morsels is one of my favourite springtime rituals. I had to force myself to keep hiking. The morning's hike would be an easy one, just 2.5 miles downhill to the dam, and then another 2 miles off the trail and into the village. Our path soon brought us to a parking area close to the dam. Fontana Dam marks the southern boundary of Great Smoky Mountains National Park, so we were required to fill out a park permit at the visitor centre. It was a simple form requiring only basic information and no fee. A car pulled into the parking area and unloaded a hiker. We discovered the driver was the owner of the Hike Inn, returning one of her guests to the trail. She apologised for not having a room for us, but offered to drive us the remaining 2 miles to the village, dropping us off in front of the Fontana Lodge. We checked in and found a beautiful lodge, a comfortable room, an exceptional restaurant and a Coke machine. Oh yes, life was good. At the post office, Sailor picked up a food box from his wife, and I resupplied from my bounce box, taking things I judged necessary for the next 100 miles and sending the remainder ahead to Hot Springs, North Carolina. After a stop at a laundromat, we went back to our room for what would become the food box ritual. Sailor's wife always sent far more food than he could possibly carry, so he dumped out the box, took his choice first, and then granted Marathon Man and me the extra fruit and candy. At the Mountain View Bistro in the lodge, we met another group of hikers, and in the usual exchange of information, we learned that our path across the dam was closed. The Appalachian Trail follows a roadway that crosses over the top of the dam, but a defect had been discovered. Construction crews were set up to repair it, and the dam was closed to all traffic. A defect in this concrete monstrosity? At 480 feet, this was the highest dam east of the Rockies and backed up 30 miles of water to create the lake. A defect could not be reassuring to folks living downstream. I was intrigued, though, by another option. If we were brave enough, we could try to sneak across the dam. A $300 fine was meant to discourage anyone from ignoring the closed signs, but several hikers who had crossed and were subsequently caught assured us that their fines had been only $100. I wanted to attempt the crossing. If caught, I would just consider the penalty a fee for my travel, like a toll booth on an interstate. But Marathon Man stubbornly refused to go across that dam. Maybe it was because the fine also came with a night in jail. The next morning we took a shuttle to the trailhead at the northern end of the dam. It was decision time. If the Appalachian Trail is closed for any reason, the marked alternate route is considered the official AT. Since the trail across Fontana Dam was now inaccessible, a 2-mile Blue Blaze trail circled the concrete wall, connecting the AT once again on the northern side. That Blue Blaze detour trail left the AT back at the parking area on the southern end of the dam, where we had hitched a ride to the lodge yesterday. Many of the other hikers who had stayed in the village just took the shuttle to the northern end, picked up the AT there and avoided the 2-mile detour. If I started hiking at this northern point, I could no longer claim to be a purist hiker. I could not cheat. I asked the van driver to take me back to the parking area by the marina where we had left the trail yesterday, and I would pick up the Blue Blazed detour there. My Appalachian hike would be 2 miles, my Appalachian hike would be 2 miles longer than the official miles listed in the handbook. Sailor and Marathon Man detoured with me. Sailor was also still a purist hiker, and Marathon Man knew that his plans would take him off the trail in a few days, so his choice was to keep our company a bit longer. We left the parking lot, and a few steps down the trail we came to the Fontana Dam shelter. The hiking community knows this place as the Fontana Hilton. It's one of the more modern shelters on the trail, with 2 levels that sleep 24, a smooth wooden floor, running water, and nearby restrooms. We stopped to read the register and catch up on trail happenings. 2 miles later, we rejoined the AT at the northern end of the dam, where a welcome sign ushered us into the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. My outfitter back in Ohio had predicted cold nights and possible snow in the Smokies, but even with his warnings, I had no idea what we were heading into. Our Great Smoky sojourn began with Shuckstack Mountain, a 4-mile climb. For the next 70 miles, we will be hiking high in the mountains at elevations between 4,000 and 6,000 feet. 3 miles beyond Shuckstack, we walked into a spring scene that etched itself into my memory. At Doe Knob, large patches of white wildflowers covered the forest floor. The white fringed phacelias were small and delicate, but so plentiful that the pools of blossoms looked almost like a covering of snow. The air was getting colder, and as we approached the area of the flower snow, small round ice pellets began to fall, bouncing like hail. Little white balls bounced up and down in the field of fringed blossoms, everywhere a movement of white. The entire expanse of tiny flowers seemed to dance in excitement, waving and welcoming us to the Smokies. By 4 o'clock we had put 13 uphill miles behind us and were tired and cold and ready to end the day. In the Smoky Mountains, the risk of bear encounters is considerably higher, and all hikers are required to overnight in shelters. Most reserve spots in advance, but through hikers cannot know exactly when they will reach any given point, so each shelter holds 4 spots for the first through hikers who arrive. If the shelter is full, park regulations do permit hikers to set up camp outside, as long as tents are within protection of the building. We were only a short distance from Molly's Ridge shelter when we met a ridge runner who advised us to spend the night there. We learned from him that a large number of hikers were out, weather conditions were deteriorating, and shelters would fill up early in the afternoon. Someone had put a canvas covering on the front of this building, offering some protection from the cold wind. We 3 quickly claimed our spots inside, and I ventured out into the cold one more time to filter water at a nearby spring, 1 litre for my meal that night and 1 for my pack the next day. Hikers trickled in throughout the evening. Those arriving later had to pitch their tents outside in the cold. That night, I silently thanked my salesman at the outfitter for selling me a 5-degree sleeping bag. Even wrapped in the warm sleeping bag, I again wore every article of clothing I had with me, trying to keep the cold at bay. Extreme cold the next morning prompted a quick start. It was snowing hard and we needed to keep moving just to stay warm. I had gloves, but they were little protection against the cold. I warmed one hand under my coat against my body while holding both hiking poles in the other. Then I'd switch hands, trying to keep my fingers thawed. I grabbed the water hose coming from my pack for a drink of water, but there was nothing. My drinking water had frozen. Finally, I resorted to eating the shining ice crystals covering the trees and foliage all around me. The first cold climb of the day was a short bump over Devil's Tater Patch. Stones resembling potatoes protruded from the ground everywhere, giving this area its name. Thunderhead Mountain straddles the state line between North Carolina and Tennessee, and we crossed one of its peaks, Rocky Top. The view from the 41-foot summit was spectacular. Mountain slopes glittered with new snow, and we could see Fontana Lake lying behind us. At 2 p.m, Derek Nobb's shelter was in sight. We'd only hiked 12 miles, but the heavy snow had soaked and chilled us. Our socks and shoes were wet from trudging in 6 inches of accumulated snow. We decided to stop for the day and were among the first hikers to arrive. Happily, this shelter had not only a canvas cover protecting the front, but also a stone fireplace. We took turns warming by the fire, drying our socks and shoes. The shelter filled with frozen, weary hikers. Derek Nobb is listed as a 12-person building, but on that cold, miserable night, close to 30 hikers crammed into it. We lay body to body on the bunks and the dirt floor, unaware that even more hikers, at least a dozen tents, had camped outside in the snow. At 5 p.m, I climbed into my sleeping bag fully dressed, wearing even my now dry shoes. That began a miserable 12-hour sleeping bag marathon with no escape and very little sleep. I had elbows in my ribs on both sides and found it almost impossible to turn over or wiggle into a comfortable position without bumping into other arms, legs and heads. There was nothing to do but wait for morning. I pulled the bag over the top of my head, drawing the spring until only my nose stuck out. I couldn't sleep, but at least I was no longer cold. And of course, there was a snoring champion who showcased his talent that night. He was probably the only one who slept. By 4 a.m, hikers were packing up and leaving, complaining that it was impossible to sleep with the noise. Sailor, Marathon Man and I left at 5. There was no reason to punish ourselves when we could be on the trail making miles. We trudged over Cold Spring Knob as the morning sky started to lighten. Just as the sun made its appearance, we topped Siler's Bald and stopped, dazzled by the view. Clean, glittering snow covered endless miles of mountain ranges, and sunlight sparkled from ice crystals on every tree and bush around us. What a gift! Weather conditions had conspired to hinder our hiking, but this morning we were treated to a glittering show of wonder. Clingman's Dome, the highest elevation on the entire Appalachian Trail, reaches 6,654 feet heavenward, and every branch and bush on its heights was covered with a thick coat of hoarfrost and snow. We were climbing a huge ice castle, everything frozen and dazzling, framed against a brilliant blue sky. The sun gradually warmed us, but also created a messy trail. Snow became icy slush that once again soaked our shoes and socks. Only the spectacular views could take our minds off our cold, wet feet. We climbed the observation tower at the top of Clingman's Dome and contemplated the ranges of mountains ahead of us as far as the eye could see. At least we knew we were on the trail's highest point, and there was nowhere to go but down. Our reward for the early morning departure was just ahead. The incredible snoring machine had forced us onto the trail earlier than planned, so by mid-afternoon we were already at the trail leading to Mt Collins Shelter. The shelter was a half-mile off the trail, and none of us was excited about another night's stay in a cold, crowded shelter. 4 more miles on the trail would bring us to Newfound Gap, where the Tennessee-North Carolina runs through a parking lot beside US Route 441. 16 miles west on 441 was Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Should we go a few more shivering miles and hope to hitch a ride to Gatlinburg? I took the lead, and we hustled toward Newfound Gap. The trail led through a stand of mature hardwood trees, a grand, majestic growth of towering elder statesmen of the forest. A storm had felled many along our path, uprooting and toppling the giants. They lay in sad defeat, with large root systems exposed, still clutching the ground and the large rocks to which they had entrusted their lives. Going downhill all the way, sometimes crossing narrow boardwalks that protected fragile plant life, we arrived at Newfound Gap in less than 2 hours. Our day had been 18 miles, soaked with cold and slush and brilliant sunshine. At the state line, we took a celebratory picture and then set about finding a ride to Gatlinburg. There were several cars in the parking lot, but no one was interested in picking up 3 bedraggled hikers. Sailor suggested we walk out to the highway and try our luck at hitchhiking. The first vehicle in our sights was a pickup truck occupied by a middle-aged couple. They slowed down. "You fellows are welcome to jump on the back if you want to ride to Gatlinburg," the man said. "Where do you want to be dropped off?" he called back through the open window. Our ride dropped us across the street from a hiker-friendly motel on Ski Mountain Road. Hiking 18 miles of slushy mountain trails creates extreme appreciation for a hot shower. What luxury! Once we were clean and warm, the urgent need was food. After my limited menu of dry dinners, it was incredible to walk busy sidewalks and have so many choices of eateries. We settled on a steakhouse. In less than an hour, we were transported from a remote, snowy mountain forest to one of the gaudiest tourist meccas in the United States. After many cups of coffee, eggs and pancakes the next morning at the Flapjack House restaurant, we were back on the trail. Several miles brought us to a protruding rock formation called Charlie's Bunyan. Atop this high perch, we had views of both Mount LeConte and Mount Keffart, and a panoramic view of gorges and valleys stretching out in every direction. We were hiking on top of the world. At 4 o'clock, we reached the intersection of the Hughes Ridge Trail and the AT. Half a mile down Hughes Ridge was Peck's Corner Shelter. We did not like the thought of hiking that far off the AT, but the next shelter was over 5 miles away. The sunshine was fading, the falling temperature turning the slushy trail to ice. Every step that afternoon had required great care, and we had made only 10 miles. We opted for Peck's, located in a grove of beech trees. One large tree had fallen close to the shelter, and we positioned our wet shoes and socks on its large trunk, hoping to dry them in the last rays of sunlight. Our hike began the next morning with only one goal. Weary of the treacherous conditions, we were determined to get as close as possible to the northern boundary of the Smoky Mountains. This day was just as difficult as the previous two. Hiking over the slopes of Mount Sequoia, we ploughed through snowdrifts several feet deep. Geo Spur was 6320 feet high, and after that climb we slid downhill for 14 miles. Snowdrifts and icy trails made every step precarious. As the day warmed, melting ice sent little streams running down the trail. We gradually descended from 6,000 feet to 5,000, then to 4,000, where the snow and ice turned to mud. As the snow disappeared, more drifts of spring wildflowers decorated the forest, their colour and freshness lifting our spirits. We all agreed that views in the Smokies were unsurpassed, but we had seen enough. We wanted to get these mountains behind us, so we doggedly kept hiking until we reached Davenport Gap, Tennessee. Finally, at the modest elevation of 1980 feet, we bid goodbye to the Great Smoky Mountains. We had survived a 70-mile test of endurance. To celebrate our status as seasoned hikers, we added 3 additional miles over the Pigeon River, under I-40 to Green Corner Road, where the Standing Bear Hostel congratulated us on our escape from the mountains. Standing Bear is an old homestead that was converted to a hostel, with several cabins and a rustic bunkhouse. A hot shower, a whole pizza, several candy bars, 2 cans of pop and 1 litre of water later, I was a contented hiker. That night, around the community firing, I spotted a young hiker I had first met at the blueberry patch. "Muskrat, how did you get here ahead of us?" I asked in surprise. "Oh, I've been here several days already. I'm doing a work for stay." Many hostels along the trail give hikers a free stay in exchange for work. This makes it possible for hikers to stay on the trail, even on a tight budget. He explained, "After leaving the blueberry patch, I wanted to catch up with some hiker friends ahead of me, so I skipped the entire Smoky Mountains and hitchhiked up here." He was a yellow blazer. The phrase refers to the yellow blazes down the centre of a highway, and although purists would never say it aloud, we also think it represents a yellow blaze down the back of a hiker who refuses to tackle difficult sections of the AT, like the Smokies. But I bit my lip, as any purist would do when meeting a yellow blazer. I knew what Muskrat's reply would be if I took the bait and commented on his hiking style. The reply, "Hike your own hike," is heard time and again on the trail, and it's just a polite way of saying, "Shut up and mind your own business." To many hikers, the journey is more about memories than miles. As I blazed a path to my bunk that night, I thought about what I would have missed if I had skipped the Smokies. Yes, a lot of pain, but also infinite pleasures. Fields of flowers with tiny snowballs bouncing among them had welcomed us to the Smokies, and beautiful expanses of wildflowers had bid us goodbye as we departed. Most enjoyable of all was the excitement of meeting new people who were like flowers scattered along the path of my life.